have a really great treat for you this week. When this airs, we'll be celebrating Thanksgiving this week. And this is Wednesday, so tomorrow will be our Thanksgiving, and we have a special treat. I just found out that Mark Paradies is a descendant of people that were at the very first Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And I just think that's phenomenal. And so we've kind of been talking about the history of the first Thanksgiving, and to celebrate, we just kind of wanted to share some of this story with you because he's got a great story to tell. So Mark, tell us a little bit about your ancestors.
Well, I think first off, you have to start off with they didn't get here when they thought they were going to get here.
Yes.
So they thought they were going to get here earlier in the year. They thought they'd have all summer to prepare for the next winter. And instead, they ended up making 2 little laps partway across with this little ship called the Speedwell, in addition to the Mayflower. And the Speedwell leaked and was going to sink, and they'd have to bring it back, and they'd do repairs in England and take off with it again and go back a second time and try to repair it. And finally, they decided, we can't get this to work. They crowded everything aboard the Mayflower and headed off in the fall to cross the North Atlantic. Horrible crossing. They were supposed to go to Virginia. They didn't make it down the coast. They got caught up in bad weather and currents and treacherous strait, and they got turned around, and they decided, the captain of the ship said, this is where we're landing.
This is it. This
right
is
here.
our new
I'm going
home.
no further. So they landed in Plymouth Harbor then, and they didn't know what to expect because they weren't even where they were supposed to be. There had been explorers, there had been fishermen come to the North American coast, but there weren't any settlers in that area. So
And we are going to talk about the root cause of the first thing.
we are going to talk
we
about
are
the root
gonna-
cause.
we
We're
are
going to
gonna-
get there. There's going to be some history. There's going to be some history in this. So they went ashore, and the first couple of days they couldn't find anybody. They didn't find any Indians. There obviously weren't any other Europeans there. And then they spotted one Indian, and that person took off. And one of the things they did find, though, they found these mounds, and when they dug into them, there was corn in the mounds.
Amazing.
Amazing. God's
Manna.
providence. God had provided corn for them.
Exactly.
And but they didn't know that was really the Indian seed corn for the next year, but they didn't know that.
Oh, well.
So eventually they met up with some of the Indians. Of course, they didn't speak any, originally the ones they found didn't speak any English. They didn't speak any, whatever the language the Indians were speaking, so they had a hard time communicating. But it was their luck, Indians' bad luck, that previous meetings of Europeans coming over on ships and fishing mainly, there was a lot of good cod fishing there off New England, that the Indians had caught smallpox from the white fishermen. And smallpox had sort of ravaged that area, so there weren't a lot of Indians living in the area.
Right.
And the ones that had been decreased in population, so they felt threatened by other tribes. So they saw this as an opportunity of, hey, there's some guys with guns, we can make a treaty with them. We'll make a mutual defense treaty, and it'll be mutually beneficial. And so it started off as a good thing. The story I've heard passed down is that I can't remember whether it's the head military guy or the governor was trying to was staying with the chief of the Indian tribe, but he was sick and he had this stuff growing in his mouth, so he took his knife and scraped his tongue, and somehow that helped
That's
him.
quite a peace treaty.
Yes, somehow that helped him heal up. So then they had bonded. At that point,
bonded. No, it's
they
an
had
interesting
bonded,
bond.
and so that first
But
generation.
it got him well.
That first generation Pilgrim Indian bond was made, and they would trade for land. So, you want a pot, I want that section of land over there. And it went along well. So what happened then was the Pilgrims, only about half of the people on board were Puritans, and the other half just were coming over for the economic opportunity of developing the New World. And so they got there, and this was a company, and originally they decided they'd share and share alike. Everybody would share in the bounty, and it was sort of like socialism.
Right.
We'll all share.
Let's all,
the first
like everybody's going to do the same amount of work.
Yeah, well, the first winter was a disaster. People were sick. About half of the Pilgrims die the first winter. If you look at it, it's amazing. And so So my ancestor, what happened was William White and was it Susanna White, and okay, what was the other son? The other son was Resolved, and then Peregrine. Peregrine was born in November aboard the ship in Plymouth Harbor.
So like the first baby.
The first baby born in the New World to the Pilgrims was Peregrine. It's my ancestor.
That's just the coolest.
But what happens next? William White, the father, dies of flu, cold, pneumonia, something. They were all getting weak. They didn't have enough food. They were considering eating their seeds that they were going to plant the next year. It was all terrible, that winter was.
Well, it's like I said, it started out with like 100 and something people and ended up with like 50.
They get to spring and things aren't going so well because they don't know how to plant crops that'll grow in the New World. They don't know how to hunt in the New World. But they meet an Indian who's not a member of the tribe but is living there who speaks English. And he spoke English because he'd been captured and brought aboard a fishing vessel and learned to speak English that way. And he then starts, I guess I'd say, coaching them on, well, this is how you plant corn, and this is how you do this, and this is how you hunt in the wild. And so they learned a whole lot that first summer.
It was quite a destiny for him. I mean, if you look at the story,
Squanto.
It kind of reminds you of the stories in the Bible when people, they get in a horrible situation, but then they are used in such a great way.
You never know.
Yeah.
So they eventually get through that first summer, and then they have the bounty of their first harvest. I imagine squash and corn and other vegetables. They've learned to hunt. They may have deer.
But everybody was doing their own gardens.
Yeah, well, that's right. They instead of being socialist and everybody owns the property together, they decided to split it up into family plots. And all the boys, because there were boys who didn't have parents, they were parceled out to families, and everybody worked their land, and you got to keep the bounty of your harvest and sell the excess. And there really wasn't anybody except other pilgrims to sell to because the boat had gone back. This is another thing. Imagine the next spring, the boat leaves you.
Yeah, that would be.
And you've got nothing. There's
Gilligan's Island.
Yeah, it's like Gilligan's Island. So they get through this summer, and they were very hungry all the time, and they have their first big harvest. And it's a big harvest, and the bounty of the harvest is because everybody worked so hard because they got to keep the fruits of their own labor. So they have this, I'll call it fall celebration. We now call it Thanksgiving, and they give thanks that they, A, were still alive, and that, B, they had made friends with they weren't at least fighting the natives who were there, although they were fighting other tribes who were coming in and trying to take things away from them. And so far, so good. We've got some houses built. The ship is gone, and hopefully we're going to make it through this next winter. And what they hope then is next summer there's going to be a relief boat come with more stuff from Europe and more settlers, so that we're more than just 50 people around here.
Yes.
Because you can imagine how small that is, how little number that is.
Well, it's twice the size of our little company.
Yeah, that's right.
It's just
but a lot of those are this high. The other ones are, right?
Oh my gosh, yes. When you look at
kids.
I think it's really interesting. If you look online, you can see the names of all the people that were at that first dinner or that first feast, and about 5 of those were your ancestors out of those 50. But it'll break it down between 3.
Only 3.
Yes.
Because one was dead already.
But I think she got married.
She got married, so I don't count him as an ancestor because he's not a blood ancestor. He's a stepfather.
That's true. But I mean, it's amazing.
And they had more kids then.
And it's amazing that they have who was there.
Think of this, Betta. Get on board a ship pregnant. You're like 6 months pregnant, 7 months pregnant, and you're going off to someplace where there's nobody to help you, and then you have the baby and your husband dies. Holy cow. This is a challenge.
Women were tough as nails.
And they had to be.
That's all.
Everybody had to be.
But
I can't imagine. First off, I had trouble imagining being a pregnant woman to start with. But if I was, getting aboard a ship and going to the New World, unbelievable. So they had this big feast, and the root cause of Thanksgiving was they recognized that people working in their own interests was better than people working in the group interest. that you'd actually produce more and have a more bountiful harvest. And that was the first generation of pilgrims. Now, interestingly enough, everything didn't go along as perfection after that.
Right.
The pilgrims recognized that they needed to buy land from the Indians, so as time went on, they bought more and more land by trading.
Yeah.
And the Indians thought this was all good until all of a sudden the only land they had left was this swamp, and they didn't have the land they needed to live on. And so that's
We
about
used to
the
have
time.
better land than this.
That's about the time the first generation of pilgrims and Indians died off, and the second generation came along. And so Peregrine White was in that second generation. You know, he'd been there 30 years by then, and now all the first generation was dying off, and so the Indians wanted the land back, and they didn't have anything to trade to buy it
Right.
back. So what do?
That's a good question.
Well,
We need to.
the land philosophy of the Native Americans was not the same as the land philosophy of the Europeans.
Just go take it.
The answer is, if you want that land over there and you can take it, it
Yeah.
could be yours. So they started buying guns. Well, they already were buying guns because they were a more efficient way of hunting. And they were buying guns and more ammunition because they were going to go attack the
get their
pilgrims
land.
and get their land back.
Yeah.
So the pilgrims had also been doing what I guess we nowadays call missionary work, and they'd converted quite a few of the Indians to be Christians. And the Christian Indians came to warn them, hey, they're planning to attack
Yeah.
you. And so they were planning to go attack the Indians before they could attack them, but I think it worked out the other way. And there was this huge war, and once again, 50% of the pilgrims, now a bigger number,
Yeah.
were wiped out in this war with the Indians. And eventually the pilgrims won, and they didn't get any help from the guys up in Massachusetts or the guys down in Rhode Island. They said, oh, we got our own Indian issues, we're not getting involved with you. But they won the war, and it was a very difficult, once again, lose half your
Yeah.
population. And that was the end of that. There
Amazing.
was no more good feelings.
No more goodwill going on
No,
there.
that was.
I think it's amazing. It's an amazing story. It is a great story of Thanksgiving. It's a great story of strength of human backbone and
It's.
I mean, to
When you go back and
build
look
everything
at
from
it,
scratch.
just to think about it, it's amazing.
Yeah.
They made it.
Yeah.
And so there was reason to give thanks. Although you could look at it the other way. They could have said, "Oh, this has been such a terrible year," but they didn't.
Yeah.
They had a positive attitude. They thanked God for what they had, and that they'd made it through, and they went on from there.
Gratitude for life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was very. It's
I
a very
love it.
interesting story.
It's a fascinating
And
story.
as you
Yeah, I
decided to go back and dig in and read about it, other people can too.
I did, and it is. I mean, just go look it up. You can look up the first Thanksgiving, and you'll find his ancestor's name right there.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting and exciting.
Peregrine White,
Peregrine.
William White, Susanna White.
Resolved.
Resolved isn't a blood anthem. He's like a cousin over there, right? He's like a 52nd cousin off that way. Because it's not his. He didn't get married to somebody who had children. Peregrine got married to see.
Okay, that's where the line was.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it goes through Peregrine, the first
Okay.
baby, and Peregrine was sort of a hellraiser.
Okay.
So he wasn't exact. He was from the Pilgrim line, but he didn't become a Puritan until he was 80 years old. He decided.
Better late than never.
I'm going to convert now. I've been raising hell all my life. Now it's time to convert to be a good
bet
guy.
he was a character.
He was. He was an Indian fighter and a hellraiser, and
That's a fascinating
he had
story.
lots of stories. So.
Absolutely fascinating. Well, I know you have it's a wonderful story that you get to tell your family and pass down for generations. I told him he needs to write a book, write
Yes,
a novel
yes.
on it. But I love it, and I thank you for sharing that with us.
Oh, no problem.
I love the root cause aspect of it, of course. I
Uh-huh.
mean, fantastic.
The root cause of Thanksgiving.
And we'll have that blog article up as well,
Yes.
so people can read it. And he has some links in it where you can go and look at some of this stuff.
Yeah.
But
it's
we're
very
here
interesting.
today to just tell you we're thankful for you.
We're thankful to be here.
We are
This
so-
has
oh my
been a
gosh.
hard year for us
It
too.
has
Not
been
as hard as it was on
not
the
as hard as
Pilgrims.
theirs.
Maybe you want to go do a comparison. You say, "Oh, this has been a terrible year." It's not
No,
that bad.
Not even close.
Yep.
But that gratitude pays off no matter how bad it is. You've got to have that gratitude.
Yes, it does.
And help care for each other and get in there and dig in and make everything work.
Yes.
It's what they did.
It's a good story.
It's what we're doing.
It's what we need to hear.
It is definitely a story we need to hear. But even if you're not in the U.S., not celebrating Thanksgiving, we're thankful for you, and
Yes, we'll celebrate
we
you.
are very thankful for you. We appreciate you all over the world who work with us, and hopefully new friends in the future that'll work with us too. Mark, thank you.
You're welcome.
And happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving
and
to
all of
you
your
and to
family.
everybody.
And we'll see you back here next week.
Okay, bye.